right, let me give you some names that could be in play.
Here we go.
All right, the Yankee bench coach has been with the organization over a quarter of a century. His name is Rob Thompson. Since Joe Torre took over as manager, Rob Thompson has managed every aspect of spring training, which is a bear logistically. He does it. He's a brilliant baseball man. And talk about love for the Yankees. Let me tell you a quick story about Rob Thompson. The Yankees have done the research. I mean, this is how deeply they research what's good and bad and could lead them to more wins. You know, under Joe Torre, for most of the season, when you got on the Yankee plane, you had to have a jacket and tie on. You had to be dressed up. And that came from George Steinbrenner. Well, through doctor and sleep studies, they came out with players are not comfortable in jackets and ties on the plane, and they could wear whatever they want. So guys would come in with T-shirts and with slacks or whatever, and they were dressed casually, not like businessmen, which is what George wanted. Rob Thompson was the one guy every single trip. Even if it's 100 degrees out, he would get on the plane with a full suit and tie. And I walked up to him. I said, Robbie, you don't have to do this anymore. He said, because I'm traveling as a member of the New York Yankees. I represent the New York Yankees, and this is the way Yankees should dress. So that's his connection. Would he be the guy that they would hire? I don't know. But that's a name to consider. Another name, they want people that can identify with the young players. Al Padrique is their manager at AAA. That's somebody you'd have to consider. A guy that I've said for a long time that Brian Cashman really admires and thinks the world of. That's Pete Mackanin, who was fired as the Phillies manager and has moved up for the final year of his contract into the Phillies front office. They could obviously hire him as a manager. But would that be sexy enough to sell to New York, a guy without a Yankee pedigree?
He's older, too.
He's 62,
like 64,
I think.
Something like that.
So that's a name. There are other names out there. I mean, if you really want to get adventurous, I think Aaron Boone has always had a penchant to manage. You know, he's our lead analyst on Sunday Night Baseball and doing the World Series with Dan Schulman. I think that's a name you can consider. Here's one from out of left field. John Flaherty. John Flaherty is a manager in waiting if he ever wants to do it.
Is he also big on the numbers? Because you deal with him.
I think that he would do a little bit of both, but I think he could be a numbers guy, and
okay.
I think that the players would like him. I think that's somebody you could consider. And it could be somebody that we're not even thinking of.
None of those names, no offense to any of them, move the needle.
Well, the only one, I mean,
Flaherty maybe.
The ex-players move the needle.
Right.
Aaron Boone, a Yankee icon because of that home run. Flaherty, he's very much in the present because of the S Network and that big hit that he had.
But I don't think any of them come in wielding power. I don't think any of them are going to get people overly excited unless you're just somebody that hated Girardi and just wanted a new name.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's always the fun of letting managers go when we were growing up, right? Because there was always a list of guys that everyone knew that needed a job. But that doesn't exist anymore. Tony La Russa is not coming out of retirement, nor would anybody be interested in him coming out of retirement to manage a team.
Now, would Brian ever make a call to Jim Leland? No.
No.
Because that's not the guy he wants.
Or
he
twist Joe Torre's arm, or like any of the old names of the past.
Or go to Tony La Russa. No, or Bobby Cox. Those are not the guys he wants. He wants a guy that he has a relationship with that is in lockstep with the organization. Here's a name, Tim Naring, who is a guy that really has the trust of Brian. He's the guy who said, go out and get D.D. Gregorius. But he's a lot with his eyes, too. Would it all be the numbers? Those are names that you have to consider. But in terms of, gee, this is the guy, I'm not quite sure.
What percentage chances that it's a guy that the average baseball fan's not familiar with?
There's a chance. I don't know a percentage. You mentioned David Cohn. Talk about a guy who's into the analytics and could identify with the craziness of today's athlete. Does David want to commit to that? I have no idea. So who is out there?
Did we bring it up to him, though? He didn't seem
I think that
thrilled
David is intrigued. I don't know if he's ever considered that he would manage, but I think there's a part of David that would love to be a pitching coach. I don't know if he wants to put the commit. He'd be a brilliant pitching coach, and I think that his grasp of the numbers would show that he'd be pretty good at doing this.
Yeah, it's just odd because baseball doesn't have like what football does. Let's go get Bill Cowher. Let's go get John Gruden.
Right.
Or basketball, Jeff Van Gundy. Mark Jackson. Like, there's these names that just jump out at you whenever a coaching vacancy happens. Baseball, because of what's happening, they're really... Dusty Baker, I guess, would be maybe a name, but nothing. You can't come up with a laundry list of people.
You know, one name that's very popular on Twitter that people throw at me is Alex. And like I was talking to Alex over the weekend, and I brought that up to him, and he just laughed uproariously.
But that's the way he would be if he was interested in it. He's coy enough.
Yeah, but I mean, really, talk about giving up a life.
I don't think he would do it. I'm just saying I think he would have the same reaction if he was about to sign with them 3 minutes later.
What about, yeah, good point. I agree with that. What about a name that been thrown around a lot the last couple weeks? Kalo coming back to the Yankees.
That's a possibility. Now,
how funny would that be, by the way?
The one thing is, they did let him go. They fired him as a hitting coach before he became the Met hitting coach.
So why did they fire him in the first place?
Because I think that they were just throwing chum over the boat because, the fans in their obsession with, the guys aren't hitting, so it's the hitting coach. They threw him over the boat.
But doesn't he have a great relationship with the players?
The players love him. I mean, love him. Love him. But then you could say, Met fans could say, oh, look, they took the guy that we didn't want. I don't know if that comes into play, but I think that he's in the discussion. But if you want me to tell you this is what I've heard, nobody's heard anything. And anybody that tells you they've heard anything, they're not telling you the truth. There are minor league instructors that the Yankees love. I mean, in Joel's story, there's a catching, Josh Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a big enough name? And,
no.
He's been up and down the organization. I'm not sure. But they'll do their due diligence, and they'll interview people, and maybe they'll get blown away. The great story about a heavily analytic team is the Dodgers. The Dodgers were going to hire Gabe Kapler. That's all there was to it. He's a numbers guy, really adheres to that. But they allowed themselves to have their mind changed. Dave Roberts came in and blew them away. And then the Mets, to their credit, Kevin Long was the guy. And they allowed themselves to have an open mind, and Mickey Callaway blew them away. Will the Yankees allow themselves to be blown away, or does Brian have somebody in mind that he also thinks is going to be the manager?
You would think that this organization is buttoned up enough that they already have a list of people, and they've already looked at who they most likely will offer the job to.
I've heard front office guys tell me a great organization always has a list of who'll be the next manager,
yes.
even if you love the manager you have.
Oh, you're ready to go.
Right.
They're not going to be lost. Just taking people off the street because they're desperate. No,
right.
they've got a plan. The other thing that well-run organizations do, you don't find anything out.
Right.
Because they're keeping this buttoned up.
Did anybody really know about the Girardi stuff or just read the tea leaves? Because believe me, Brian Cashman did not call up a writer and drop a dime and go, Girardi's out.
This was
Steimer, that's not what this organization does. They're very buttoned up.
All this was based off of him being at Yankee Stadium for an hour.
Right.
That's all it was based off of. Not anything that anybody said. Because the organization's smart enough to keep it close.
Right. 1-800-919-3776. Tri-State Buick GMC listener hotline. We go to Lauren in Old Bridge. Lauren.
Hi, guys. First-time caller.
Oh, cool.
I'm sorry about my voice. I just got out of surgery yesterday. Yeah, I had kidney stones taken out.
Oh, my goodness.
It's not fun. I've had that. Terrible.
I've had them, and they passed, but this time they decided to stick in me and stick around. I'm a huge Girardi supporter. And I'm very upset about this. And I'm looking at it like, I hope he goes off and I hope he does good somewhere else. And all the Girardi haters are going to cry their crocodile tears and say, why did we even let him go? And, does this kind of show that Brian Cashman is going to stick around?
Absolutely. He's definitely coming back.
Yeah. He's making all these decisions. He's going to Hal Steinbrenner, and now,
It's just a matter of putting it on a piece of paper, but he's definitely coming back.
Okay, and Don, are you a little upset? Do you think the Mets are a little upset that they did not wait this out and maybe got Joe Girardi?
No, it's funny, Lauren, because we were talking to Stephen A. Smith before the show started, and he's like, my condolences, and I shook his hands. What don't I know? He says, if your team had waited a week, you'd have Joe Girardi.
No, they wouldn't.
And I said, no, because I don't think Joe Girardi is going to go from $5 million a year down to whatever the Mets are paying Mickey Callaway. The Mets, because they're analytical and don't want to spend a lot of money, aren't going to spend, even $3 million for a new manager.
I don't know what Callaway makes, but I wouldn't say it's much more than $1 million. If
right.
that.
So is Joe Girardi going to go from $5 million a year, and likely will be able to command that someplace else, maybe with Washington, to take a job for $1 million just to be able to still manage? I don't think that's the case. So I don't think the Mets would ever even go after Girardi. As much as I'd love to see them do it, I think he's out of their price range.